Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear friends. Hope you had a good week today and you're feeling well today. So, we're going to start off with a news topic today. We have been discussing various topics with regard to the Islamic directives which are found in the Quran. So, today, our topic relates to something which is more concerning our collectivity. And this is something which is also very, very intriguing, that of the many scientists, political scientists, which have uh, sprung over the years, many have sought to present what exactly is the political system which Islam envisages, and what are the political directives of Islam, which are enshrined in the Quran. And many people in the current era as well have come up with voluminous treatises on this subject. We have thinkers from all over the world expressing their opinions. But one thing that needs to be understood before I just begin our today's lesson, that as far as system is concerned, there is no system which is defined in the Quran, as a matter of fact, for either the political system which a country should follow, or the economic system. What the Quran actually gives us is certain principles, certain guidelines, and the system has to be made in the light of those guidelines. So, therefore, it would be more uh, appropriate to call them the political principles of Islam. In other words, the political principles which are mentioned in the Quran, and a system has to be made on the basis of these principles which are provided. So, this is a very important point that we need to understand, because you see, systems develop over a period of time in different societies with different outlooks as well. But as long as they adhere to certain principles which are universal, then we can easily classify all systems, if they adhere to the principles which are enshrined in the Quran, that they are actually representing the political systems of Islam. And another thing as a result which would become evident is that as far as these political directives are concerned, uh, deriving them from the Quran is something, of course, which is the job or the task of a Quranic scholar. I mean, he will tell you that these are the 4 or 5 or 6 basic principles which the Quran outlines for for the political system of a country. However, to make those political directives translate into a system is the work of political scientists, who may or may not be Islamic scholars. But for them, it's not essential to be Islamic scholars or Quranic scholars. Yes, as far as the principles are concerned, that those particular principles have to be derived by people who are specialists. Therefore, we would always look towards Quranic scholars to give us those principles. But as I said, how those principles have to be dilated, have to be understood and implemented in a society, that is something which relates to people who are, as I said, political scientists. They are specialists in these areas, and therefore they would translate those principles derived by Quranic scholars into a system. On a very similar note, uh, you can also gauge this fact that if a country's political system adheres to those directives, then a system, while at the same time following the same directives, could be different in different countries which coexist. Because you see, as long as the principles are adhered to, the the system itself, which is of course based on those principles, can have variations in different societies, in different countries, in different ages. So this again is a very important aspect of these political directives, that they give you this liquidity, they give you this freedom, that as long as those principles are adhered to, the system which comes into being in various periods of time, even in the same time, even in different countries which coexist, that system could be different. But as I said, if the principles which they follow is the same, then absolutely there's no problem with it. So this is an important departure from the books that have been written in the last 100 years. And why is it that these books have been written mostly in the last 100 years? Well, then that's another reason that we need to know. And that is, if you have studied Islamic history, you would be knowing that the caliphate existed in the past 14 centuries in some form or the other. And the last form of the caliphate which existed was the Ottoman Empire. Ottoman Empire, which was almost 500 years old when it was abolished in 1924 by Mustafa Kemal. So that's just like 100 years ago. And once that caliphate was abolished, we found that various countries which were actually parts of that province, part of a province of the Ottoman Empire, or because of the First World War and the Second World War, because of the creation of new countries, these provinces which were part of the Ottoman Empire actually became independent countries. They sought independence from the political powers under which they worked. So we have a lot of independence which was began, for example, from the Dutch, from the Spanish, from the Englishmen. So they had from the Frenchmen as well. So it was these countries which slowly sprung up. They slowly gained independence and at the hands of freedom movements, which ultimately resulted today that we have a number of Muslim countries, and most of them are nation states. Of course, there are some purely Islamic states. I mean, when I say Islamic states, it means that they don't grant the equal right of citizenship to non-Muslims, like, for example, Saudi Arabia. But by and large, we have these nation states in which every citizen has equal rights. So when these nations got independence, the Islamic entity in them, or scholars who lived in them, thought that, well, now that we have gained independence, we need to have some kind of Islamic system in our countries. And so they started writing books on the political system of Islam. And unfortunately, I would say that they fall well short of what exactly needs to be done as far as an Islamic system is concerned, because, as I said, this is nowhere to be found in the Quran. And you look in the Quran for a system and you don't find it. And this is why it happens that people start to fill in with some of the gaps that they don't find these books. On the other hand, the approach that I have taken in line of some of the scholars which I have studied with and read from, that approach is radically different from this approach in which you derive an Islamic system from the Quran, which I have just explained, that you don't derive a system, you derive those principles, and then let political scientists develop a system in the light of those principles. So this was an important introduction that I needed to give to you before I start off. So let us now start off with these political directives. And as you can remember, if you've gone through these directives, that basically as you gauge through them, as you go through them, they can clearly tell you that as far as the directives are concerned, they are so precise, they are so fundamental as well, that it's like simply you can enumerate them on your fingertips. So these are 5 basic principles. 5 political principles which the Quran has given. And if you are able to understand those 5 principles, then any person who is well versed with the political norms or the political areas, he can or she can develop a system on the basis of these principles. Okay, let us study the first of these principles, and this is called the basic principle, because amongst all these 5 principles, this is something which stands at the root of everything. So the words are, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu atiyu Allah wa atiyu Rasul wa ulil amri minkum fa in tanaza'tum fi shay'in farudduhu ila Allah wa Rasul in kuntum tu'minuna billahi wal yawmil akhir zalika khairun wa ahsanu ta'wila. So let me just translate this verse. This is verse 59, Surah Nisa, which is the 4th surah of the Quran. It says, Believers, obey God and obey the Prophet, and those of you who are in authority. And if you disagree among yourselves in any matter, refer it to God and the Prophet. If you believe in Allah and the last day, this is better and more seemly as regards the consequences. So the underlying thing which is mentioned here is in the first part of this verse, which says that obey God and obey the Prophet and those of you who are in authority. Of course, this last clause, those of you who are in authority, refers to Muslim rulers or rulers who have been elected to this position. So here there is this, I can say, the triumvirate, a three-pronged leadership which is given here. And this was revealed, as you know, when God's rule was established, had been established in Medina, with the Prophet administering that kingdom or that empire or that polity, which is of course something which is based on the Mistaq of Medina or the Covenant of Medina. And it said that believers, when you are living in this state of Medina, you have to obey God, of course, His Prophet, and those of you who are ruling you. So this is a fundamental principle that wherever we create an Islamic system, the first principle that needs to be kept in mind is that the guidance provided by God and God's Prophet vis-a-vis the rules set out regarding regarding the political directives have to be followed. In other words, no law can be made which is repugnant or which is against the guidance in political affairs provided by God and His Messenger. So this is the first and fundamental principle, that whenever you are making laws in a country, whenever you are legislating laws in a country and you're living there, then first of all, you have to understand that these laws cannot be made in violation of the guidance which God and His prophets have provided in the form of the Qur'an and the established principles of the practices of the Prophet Abraham. So that cannot be overruled in any way. And the third part, which is actually mentioned here, refers to that discipline that has to be maintained at all cost as citizens of a state. It says you have to obey the ulul amr, those who rule you, which of course mean that as citizens of a country, you have to conform to the laws of the country, even if you differ with them. You may not like the law, but you have to follow the law. You have to follow the rule of law. And as I have explained perhaps in some of my earlier discussions, that this is a very fundamental thing which has been actually set out for us. It tells us that obeying the law is something which has been ordained or which has been actually directed to us, or we have been told that we have to follow the rule of the law of the land. So, in other words, here we have to find out that on the one hand, we must follow the guidance provided by God and His Prophet, and on the other hand, the laws which have been legislated by the ruler of a country or the parliament of a country, they must be adhered to. And of course, this would mean that we have to be loyal citizens of the state that we live in. Conspiring against it or indulging in high treason is unthinkable. This is simply not possible. We have to not only be citizens who are loyal to their state, at the same time, we have to be people who follow the law. And let me just explain this, that it's not just common law. I mean, laws we might not even imagine. My reference is that even laws as trivial, because this is how we regard these laws, as traffic laws or tax laws or any laws that by which you govern a country, they have to be followed. So if you are driving a car without a license, it's not only a violation of the law of the land, it's also a violation of the Sharia of God, of God's own principle, because God has told us that we have to follow the law of the land. Similarly, just to give you another thing that we consider to be a minor offense, if there is a law that you cannot text while driving, then again, of course, this is something that is hazardous. It can really lead to a lot of problems or even loss of life because of texting while driving. at the same time, it's an offense on the basis of religion as well. It's not just a political offense. It's not just an offense which relates to your own law of the country. It is a violation of the Sharia as well, or the law of God as well. So you can see that how important it is to follow the law. When you break the law, you're not just breaking the law, you are actually breaking the divine commandment, which tells us that we have to follow the law. And then this verse follows up, which says that فَإِن تَنَعْزَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ فَرُدُّوهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَالرَّسُولِ. So if there is a difference in matters of discourse which relate to the opinion or what the opinion people have regarding what guidance the Quran has provided us, then look what the verse tells us. It says that you must refer your difference of opinion to the book of God and, of course, to the dictates of his prophet. Which, in other words, means, of course, that as far as the laws of the country are concerned, they are to be legislated by the parliament. But as far as the law of the Quran and Sunnah is concerned, which is to be implemented, then of course, whoever is implementing it, there could be a difference in the interpretation of that law. But that divine law, if you think there is an interpretation difference, then that difference has to be resolved by once again having recourse to the book of God and finding out that what does it actually support, whose opinion does it actually support. So this is like a very, very basic principle enshrined in the Quran that, first of all, as I said, laws have to be made. Whatever law has to be made cannot be against the Sharia or against the guidance provided by the Quran. And secondly, other than the religious laws, the common law or the non-religious laws which relate to the governance of a country, they will be legislated by the parliament, as we will be discussing a little shortly. But they have to be followed, even if you have a difference of opinion, you don't like them. And that is very important, because that tells us that obeying the law of the land is something which the Quran has always wanted us to do. And it in no case warrants that we should not obey the law of the land. We have the right to criticize the law. Of course, that's a democratic right. But disobeying the law is not an option. Okay, now let's move on to the next principle. Now, this next principle actually states the real responsibility of a Muslim state. What does it state? This again is verse 58 and surah number 4, which is surah Nisa. The words are, Inna Allaha ya'murukum an tu'addul amanati ila ahliha wa iza hakamtum bayna an-nas an tahkumu bil 'adl inna Allaha ni'ma ya'izukum bi inna Allaha kana sami'an basira. So, as I said, this is the second principle, and how important this principle is and how it shines amongst various principles which we as human beings do at times enumerate when we are enumerating various responsibilities of a state. It says, believer, God has decided to bestow political authority on you. So on this occasion, God commands you to hand over the trusts to their rightful owners. And when you judge between men, this is the important area that we have to really lend our ears to. It says, when you judge between men, pass this judgment with fairness. إِذَا حَكَمْتُمْ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ أَن تَحْكُمُوا بِالْعَدْلِ. When you judge between people, judge with fairness. إِنَّ اللَّهَ نِعِمَّا يَعِزُكُمْ بِهِ. Indeed, this is from God, an excellent admonition. Indeed, God is He who hears and sees all things. So, as you can see, the real responsibility of a state which is envisaged by the Quran is to administer justice. I mean, this justice has to be the queen of all virtues, not only in our personal dealings, but also in our collective dealings as well. So, at the state level, it has to be justice which has to be given to all the citizens without any differentiation, equal opportunity towards justice. And again, it's not just the justice that we find ourselves facing in a court of law, but even justice at the social sphere, which is called social justice. What does that mean? It means that you are given your basic your basic amenities. So when you are creating a system which is based on social justice, it means that everyone has an opportunity to stand in the society according to his own talents. So a system of merit has to be created in the society in which a person can climb the ladders of a society on the basis of merit, on the basis of justice. It should not be that money should rule a country and or other means through which people defeat other people, like for example bribery or other such things. But the system has to be such that justice, not only at the court level, but at the social level, which would mean that there should be a system in which the basic necessities of life have to be met with in all cases. And people have to be placed in a society on the basis of their abilities and on the basis of their talents, and they are able to actually reap the benefits of the system that is around them. So look at this principle and then look at most of the Muslim countries that we find around us. And you'll find that this system of justice is severely lacking in many of the countries. Of course, there are exceptions, but in most countries, you'll find this justice in Muslim countries not being available, not only at the level of the court, but also at the level of the society. Look at some of the education issues in which this, of course, is not there. You don't have that social justice between people in which they have access to those basic necessities of life. So this is how Quran wants a person or a parliament to govern its affairs. That this has to be the title of all other things. So, for example, creating peace, providing other facilities, all are natural responsibilities which every government does. But Quran wants to outline, it wants to actually sort of highlight one thing which should stand out in all cases, and that in one word, that is justice. So justice has to reign supreme at all levels in a Muslim state. So up till now, we have studied two principles. One of them is, of course, that the the basic principle is that no law can be made against the Quran. And of course, when we are following the law, then following the law is not only our civic responsibility, it's also our religious responsibility. And the second thing that we have up till now studied is that the real responsibility of a Muslim state is the establishment of the system of justice all over the state at every level. Okay, let us now move on to the third principle. Now, this third principle actually outlines the religious obligation of a Muslim state, and is composed of actually two verses which are placed very close to each other. In fact, that is the fourth principle I'm just going to presently discuss, but let's do the third principle first, and that is actually based on a single Quranic verse, which is verse 41 of Surah Hajj. It says, الذين إن مكناهم في الأرض أقاموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة وأمروا بالمعروف ونهوا عن المنكر. So these are basically four obligations of a state which the Quran outlines. It says that when believers are granted authority in this land, what will they do? So let me just read out the translation. It says, these believers are those who, if we grant them authority in this land, will be diligent in their prayer, pay zakah, and enjoin what is virtuous and forbid what is evil. So these are the collective responsibilities of a Muslim state. At the state level, they have to be organized. So, for example, let us take them one by one. First of them is the prayer. This actually means that the prayer, especially the Friday prayer, is actually referred to here. That this is a collective prayer in which the head of the state has to lead that Friday prayer in accordance with the Sunnah established by the Prophet himself, because he used to read the prayer. After him, the caliphs used to lead the prayer, and after them, of course, we find rulers giving away slowly to other scholars. Otherwise, the law which has been set in this case is that in the case of a Friday prayer, it has to be the ruler or his representatives or his governors or people like who have these positions who must lead the Friday prayer in various areas. so that in this case, they are able to present themselves for accountability before the public. So this is a big shift. It brings political leaders into directly contact with the masses, because of course when they would be leading the prayer after on Fridays, they will be coming in contact, they will be delivering those sermons, and of course they would be they just cannot have any effective appeal if they what they say or preach on that pulpit is not followed by them. So as rulers, if they are required to lead the Friday prayer, in other words, what is meant is that the Friday prayer in effect cannot be led by simple religious scholars. It has to be led at all places, wherever it is being offered, by dignitaries of the government or by the representatives of the government. As I said, there be the rulers or his appointed trustees or his appointed governors. This is something which is a big change. The second thing is Atu Zakat, that they have to organize a system of collection of Zakat. And now Zakat is not just merely a poor fund as is just generally thought of. It is a state tax. It is a tax, or in fact, it is the only tax which a Muslim government can impose on its Muslim citizens. And that is that. And it has to collect that tax. And as far as people are concerned who are paying this tax, then they also have to realize that this is their responsibility, because this is how the state is going to run. The state is going to run by the collective taxes that you give as zakat, and that zakat will be expended not only in looking after the poor, the needy, but also in running the affairs of state, like, for example, construction of bridges and roads and hospitals and educational institutions. All works of public welfare will be carried out by the government through the zakat money which is collected. So this is a correction that has to be made in our concepts, that zakat is not just merely for funding the poor. Of course, that is a given, but more than that, it has to be given to the state so that the state can then, on a wider canvas, give it back to the needy as well and run the whole business of the state as well. And then the second thing is the amaru bil ma'ruf or nahu anil munkar, that the state has the responsibility of enjoining what is virtuous and forbidding what is evil. And what does that mean? Well, the word ma'ruf and munkar are common words of Arabic, and they refer to, for example, ma'ruf refers to the good. When it says what is virtuous, it means what is virtuous to all human beings, something which is considered to be good by every person. It does not relate to any sort of religious directive. It relates to general principles, or you can say human values, which are acknowledged by everyone. So this is their third responsibility, that they will enjoin ma'ruf, which is whatever is considered to be the right or the good by all human beings. That has to be actually a means of education. And one of the ways which can be done is, again, the Friday pulpit. When of course this Friday pulpit is given in the hands of government dignitaries, they are required to use their sermons to improve the moral conditions of their people. So universal morality can be what is implied by the word ma'ruf. What are universal morals? Whatever they are the ones that the state is responsible through the Friday sermon, of course, through other areas as well, through all other means of education, so that a good moral nature of citizen polity is developed. So people who live in a country, they have to be given this moral instruction, this moral training. And again, this is something of a very, very revolutionary way in which in this moral instruction is not just left to your own personal development. Of course, that is also a good thing that you should do. But a state has this responsibility as well, that it uses its machinery to make people good human beings, to make them upright, to make them people who are something of that feel pride about. We feel proud about as human beings. So educating them as good human beings, educating them on basic morals is the responsibility of the state. That is what this actually word means, amaru bil ma'ruf. And the third and the fourth thing actually is وَنَهَوْا عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ, which means that all things which are munkar. Now, munkar, just as maruf is something which are morals which are regarded to be good and correct by whole mankind. Similarly, munkar refers to those acts of immorality which are considered to be wrong by all mankind. For example, lying. For example, bribing. For example, extortioning. For example, embezzlement. So these are evils which are considered to be evils by every single person. So, and maruf, again, something which is virtuous and good, regarded to be universally good. So universal good is called maruf, and universally bad things are called munkar. So the fourth obligation is that they have to stop those evil things. And of course, for them, not only educational purposes can be used, but at times the force of the law can be used as well. Therefore, the police department or other departments which are instituted to stop people from doing certain things which should not be done in the society, they can be used for the implementation and stop people from indulging in activities which are universally wrong. So these are the four responsibilities of a Muslim state, and they constitute its religious obligations. Remember, the word religious is important here because other obligations could be anything that they find themselves in line with their common sense and experience that have to be done as an obligation. But other than those obligations, there are these four religious obligations which a Muslim state has to follow. It must institute a system of prayer in the society. And of course, this would mean that the prayer is organized at every level in various stratas of the society, so that people are given the opportunity to come to the mosque and pray. And just as a side note, women also should be given this opportunity to go to the mosque so that they are able to pray. Arrangements have to be made for that as well. Sadly, it is neglected in many countries, but this is something which is a part of that as well. Paying the zakat tax, then of course enjoining what is virtuous and forbidding what is munkar or evil. So these are the four responsibilities. Okay, let's move on to the fourth. Remember, we have 5 principles, so we are now just about to study the fourth principle. Now, this fourth principle is actually, as I said earlier on, is composed of 2 verses, and it says the first of them is verse 11 of Surah number 9, which is Surah Tawbah. It says, فَإِن تَابُوا وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَوُا الزَّكَاةَ فَإِخْوَانُكُمْ فِي الدِّينِ وَنُفَصِّلُ الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَعْلَمُونَ, which means that if they repent, are diligent in the prayer, and pay zakat, they are your brethren in religion. They are your brethren in religion. So what does that mean? That if they do 2 positive things and 1 negative thing, I mean, they give up. When the words are in tabu, it means that they give up things which are against religion. So that is repentance. And positively, if they are diligent in the prayer and pay zakat, then they are your brethren in religion, which means they have equal status in religion, and therefore they cannot be given any inferior status in this regard. And then we have another verse of a similar pattern. It says, فَإِن تَابُوا وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَوُا الزَّكَاةَ فَخَلُّوا سَبِيلَهُم, which means if they repent, are diligent in the prayer, and pay zakah, leave them alone. So you can clearly see, if you just compare these 2 verses once again, the first part is exactly the same. It says, in tabu wa aqamu salat wa atu zakat. Both verses have this clause in common. If they repent, adhere to the prayer, and pay zakat, this is common in both verses. The difference is, in the first, it says, فَخَلُّوا سَبِيلَهُمْ, leave them alone. Nothing else can be demanded from them. And the next one says that they are your brethren in religion. You just cannot, let me see. Yes, you just cannot regard them to be anyone inferior. So this actually gives us the rights of the Muslims who live in a Muslim state, that positively they would be required to adhere to the salah, which is the prayer, and the zakat. If these are the 2 things that they openly profess to, then no one can regard them to be non-Muslims. They have the same rights as Muslims. And because the words are, they are your brethren in religion, they have equal rights in religion. And other than that, it says that if they adhere to these two principles. The next verse says, the two principles of the salat and zakat. فَخَلُّوا سَبِيلَهُم. You leave them alone. You just cannot demand anything more from them. They would be, they have the same rights as Muslims if they offer these two things. Nothing else can be demanded. And it is from here that we derive the fact that no tax can be imposed on Muslim citizens other than zakat, unless, of course, it is from their own consent. What a Muslim parliament can do is it has to run the affairs of its state by the collection that it makes through zakat. There could be other sources as well, but if it has to be a tax, it can only be zakat. And if it has to be a tax which is beyond zakat, then the consent of the citizens has to be there. If the consent of the majority is not there, then no zakat, which is beyond, no tax which is beyond zakat can be imposed. So, in other words, this happens that the funds which are available to for a Muslim country to run its affairs are actually outlined by the Almighty. The zakat which is collected are the funds on which this political state must run. And I'll inshallah explain what zakat actually means, maybe in some of our other talks. But zakat is not just 2.5% as is generally understood. Yes, it is 2.5% in wealth, but in production it is 5% and 10% and even 20% in certain instances. So we need to revise that or revisit our concept of zakat as well, because to us, zakat perhaps is just a poor tax which is 2.5% levied annually. No, this is not the case, but that is the discussion which I'll leave for another time. But as far as this is concerned, that what exactly are the rights? Then all Muslims have the same rights if they are able to exhibit the fact, if they are able to guarantee this fact that they are Muslims who pray and pay zakat. They will not be given anything less in this regard. Okay, now let's go to the fifth and final system, which is something which is very important, and it gives us the real punchline of a Muslim political authority. It says, وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. Look, just these four words, and they have defined the whole system or the whole principle on which a system has to be built. It says, and their system is based on their consultation, which is verse 38, surah number 42. It means that the system of governance of a Muslim state or a state has to be on the basis of consultation. It has to be democratic. It cannot be autocratic. It cannot be a monarchy. It cannot be a theocracy. It cannot be any other thing that you can imagine. If there is a Muslim government or a government that is envisaged by the Qur'an, this verse says that it has to be based on consultation, which means that you have to seek the opinion of the people in this regard. So, which means that if there is a difference in this opinion, then whoever holds the majority, that particular party or that particular faction will be elected to rule. So, Amruhum Shura Bainahum actually is a very all-invasive principle, which tells us that if you have to elect a ruler, it has to be on the basis of consultation. People will give their opinion, and in other words, this is no different than from democracy. So, in all democratic setups, we elect people through the opinion of people. So, this is something democracy. I mean, what we can say is the norms of Western democracy that have evolved in the past couple of centuries. They, of course, have some other things as well, but the basic spirit is the same, that the rulers have to be elected through the opinion of the people. And remember, this was said by the Quran 14 centuries ago, when there was hardly any chance of the say of people. There were monarchies all over the world in 14 centuries ago. People were despotic rulers. There would be tribal elders, all sorts of people. And the say of the common man was never elicited. It was never solicited. So in 14 centuries ago, the system which the Quran gave was, it empowered the people. It said that the common people, whoever they are, they shall have a say in electing their rulers. So in other words, we can say that the system of a Muslim state, of a Muslim government, is based on this democracy, in which you elect people by your own opinion, in which laws are legislated in the parliament on the basis of a majority vote, and which, of course, does not mean that that majority has the final authority. Yes, until and unless there is some other majority which emerges against a law which is instituted, that law will be followed. But as I've just explained, that the majority principle is just to resolve differences of opinion. So, in the case of a consensus, if all people have the same opinion, the law will be implemented. But if there is a difference of opinion in a parliament, then that opinion will be resolved through a majority vote. But before that, the parliament itself shall come into being through an election in which people are elected, and because this is what ensures the opinion of the common man. Now, as far as that system is concerned, which is actually put into place through an election, whether it's the parliamentary form of democracy or it's the presidential form, that doesn't matter, because both are democratic setups. Both are based on consultation. So there is no objection in this matter. Whether it's presidential, whether it's parliamentarian, it's the choice of the people. But the spirit is that there cannot be a monarch, there cannot be a despotic government, there cannot be a dynasty, there cannot be a whole lineage in which the father rules and the father is succeeded by the son and the family itself. It cannot be a family rule. It has to be a rule in which the person who is going to rule, or the party is going to rule, is to be elected, and at the same time, once that party is in place, once it's governing, then the laws will also be elected on the base, shall be legislated on the basis of consultation, which means that the majority will always have this say in instituting a law. And once that majority loses its majority, I mean, a new majority takes over, and law, of course, will be changed, and even a government can be disposed of, of course, if it loses the confidence of the majority. So you can see, all in all, it's basically a democratic government, and this is something in line with what happened in the first four caliphs as well. Later on, of course, unfortunately, this democracy, or this nature of government, turned into a monarchy in the early Islamic history. But the first four caliphs were elected on the basis of democratic principles. And as a side note, I should also like to add here that since it's the will of the people, or the say of the people, that has to be implemented, if people elect a woman as their ruler or their leader, it is perfectly okay. And as I perhaps discussed elsewhere, that there is this feeling that perhaps women cannot rule an Islamic state. That is not correct. And this, of course, that particular opinion has been formed on the basis of a hadith, which we have already discussed in some of our maybe other sessions and in other courses, and which we might be discussing in due time. But as a principle, it has to be understood that whoever enjoys the majority confidence, whether it's a man or a woman, shall become eligible to rule. So this actually is a summary of the 5 principles of governing a Muslim state, or a state itself. So just let me summarize them once again. The first one is that no law can be made which is against the Qur'an and Sunnah, and whatever laws are enacted by the rulers, they have to be followed in principle and in spirit as well. Then the second thing is that the real responsibility of a Muslim state is the administration of justice at all stratas of the society, in all stratas of the society. The third thing that we discussed, or the third principle, it actually outlines the 4 religious obligations of a Muslim state, which means that they have to institute a system of the prayer, they have to institute a system of collecting taxes, they have to institute a system in which universal morality is enjoined on people, and what is universally regarded to be evil is stopped in the society. And then the fourth principle that we discussed was what are the rights of a Muslim. It means that people who are praying, they profess faith in praying, they demonstrate that they are people who pray, and they pay zakat. These are the 2 principles which make them Muslims in a register. And of course, they have to give up anything which is against religion. And then the 5th and last principle, which I just discussed, is Amruhum Shura Bainahum, which means that the authority of the majority, or the say of the people, has to be adhered to and democratically a government has to be elected, and democratically has it got to be disposed of. And finally, let me also share this, that these principles that you have just studied were basically given. They were given when, of course, the Islamic State had been just formed in Arabia under the rule of the Prophet. And today, of course, there is a slight difference that states which are today, which are formed, they are called nation states. And in a nation state, every person who is part of the political setup has equal rights. So, for example, non-Muslim citizens who live in a nation state will have the same rights as Muslim citizens. They cannot be regarded as second rate in any way, because of the fact that a nation state, wherever it comes into existence on the basis of this equal rights of a citizen. So with these words, I conclude my session, and I do hope and feel that perhaps we have discussed what exactly the Quran envisages vis-a-vis a political Sharia, if I may call it, or political principles that I may call it. And just to revise that note, which I discussed in the beginning, remember that Islam does not give any political system. There is no political system to be found in the Quran. What we find in the Quran are political directives or political principles. So a system has to be based on those principles. It can vary from time to time. It can vary from society to society. But as long as it adheres to those principles, there is absolutely not a problem. And similarly, as I said, that all parts and all forms of democracy, whether it's a parliamentary democracy or a presidential democracy, both are, of course, democracies which are elected on the basis of people having their say. They're equally acceptable. But neither a theocracy, you know what theocracy is. Theocracy means the rule of a select few and the rule of the ulama or the religious scholars, which, of course, an example of that in recent times, even today, is Iran. So in Iran, we have scholars who are ruling a Muslim country. So Islam does not envisage that. It tells us that this has to be the say of people. Similarly, it does not support monarchy. In the past, we had monarchies in our in our political arena. In the whole caliphate, you can see the Umayyads, the Ottomans, all of them were monarchies. They had succession within the family. And unfortunately, this was in complete disregard to the principle which has been outlined. So I'm now invite you all to have a discussion on what we have just discussed. And if you have any questions, please don't withhold them. Yes, Amira, please go ahead.
Assalamualaikum, sir. Sir, I had a question. You said that the Khilafat cannot, like, it's not something that's been outlined in the directives, right?
Please say it again.
The Khilafat, like not Khilafat, sorry, monarchy, like coming from the Saudi Arabia right now. Does it have monarchy or is it Khilafat? I'm kind of confused.
First of all, let me explain a little more. Of course, Saudi Arabia is a monarchy. I mean, what does a monarchy mean? A monarchy means that there is a single person who is ruling. He has the right to overrule any parliament or any consultative body. The ruler will have the final authority, like the king has the final authority. He has the right to veto. So Saudi Arabia today, of course, is a monarchy because the succession is in line with the Saud family. Now, as far as the word Khilafat is concerned, it's a good question by you, Amira. You see, the word Khilafat does not actually, it does not carry any religious ring to it. It actually means the political system. Whatever the political system is called Khilafah. Or in other words, Khilafah is just an Arabic word for the English word system, political system. So whether that political system is a monarchy, whether it's a democracy, whether it's an autocracy, whether it's a theocracy, everything can be called a Khilafah. So it is erroneous to conclude that perhaps that Islam has given this term to us. The term of Khilafah existed. It actually refers to the collective system, whatever that be. So people think that the collective system, whatever Islam envisaged 14 centuries ago, that was called Khilafah. No, that's not correct. As I said, it's just the Arabic word for the English word political system. So it doesn't have any religious ring to it. It is not something holy. It is not something even mentioned in the Quran in this meaning. Okay, let me ask you this question. Uh, this question is based on what we have just discussed. And do you think that in a nation state where Muslims are in majority, Islam allows a non-Muslim to be elected as the ruler of that country? Would that be in line with what we have just studied? Is there let me rephrase my question. Is there a possibility in a nation state, like, for example, the nation states of today, in which non-Muslims end up becoming prime ministers or presidents, in which there is a Muslim majority rule? I mean, is it forbidden that a non-Muslim cannot become the president of a country whose majority consists of Muslims? Okay, yes, Amira, go ahead.
I don't the rule was that if the majority agrees on the ruler, then they can become. So if the majority Muslims do agree on a non-Muslim ruler, then I guess it would be allowed. But the non-Muslim ruler wouldn't be able to apply Muslim rules to that country. So I think until unless they don't really elect the person, then it is forbidden.
So you're absolutely right that the person who, if some non-Muslim is agreed upon, or he or she enjoys the majority confidence of the Muslim citizens or the citizen of that country, it doesn't matter whether the person elected is a Muslim or a non-Muslim. Technically, or let's say theoretically, this can be a possibility. It may or may not happen. That's another thing. But it would be wrong to say that a non-Muslim cannot become the prime minister or even the president of a state in whose majority are Muslims. So this is something which is very important, because it tells us that in nation states where every person has an equal vote, there cannot be any secondary citizens. I mean, they cannot be citizens who are citizens that have a lesser value, or they are second-rate citizens. And in a Muslim country or in a nation state, uh, all Muslim and non-Muslim citizens will have equal rights. They have equal right to vote. Only thing is that since the system would be governed through the majority mandate, so whoever is elected shall be accepted. So thank you for that, Amira. Okay, another question that I'd like to ask is that, uh, for example, if a woman is elected amongst Muslims, and would that mean that she will also have to lead the prayer, the Friday prayer that we just discussed? And would that in fact mean that Muslim women can lead prayers which are composed of men and women who follow that, who are present in a mosque? So, in other words, can a woman lead mixed prayers? Yes, Amira, go ahead.
I think that Friday prayers or praying in the masjid hasn't really been like a compulsory thing for women. So I don't think it should be that the woman should, like, I guess they can lead the prayer, but if it's not compulsory on them as a leader to lead the prayer.
But you see, this is something which has been legislated separately, that whoever is the leader,
Yes.
they could be, this option is given when the person is not the ruler of a state, that if she likes, she can pray at home. But you see, when she is elected to this position as the prime minister, maybe, or the president of a country, then it says that regardless of the gender, she will be required to lead the prayers. She will be required to to deliver the Friday sermon, and of course, this is something which is today not even talked of, and it is thought of as something which is forbidden. But because I wanted all of you to, have this concept, it's unlikely to happen in many Muslim countries. But you see, you have to understand that theoretically this is a possibility, and theoretically this is something which is allowed. However, of course, culturally, people might not like it. People might not like women to lead a common prayer in which there are men and women present. But remember, there's one thing as culture and one thing as religion. So as far as religion is concerned, it does not prohibit women from leading prayers, which are mixed prayers. But as I said, culturally, this could be something which is not pleasing to many people. So if they don't do so, then of course the reason is not religious; it's more of a cultural reason. So in
So
your minds, you have to be clear that religious reasons and cultural reasons, they are separate. So if some place women are not being allowed to lead the prayer, then, and if they offer religious reasoning, I mean, this would not be correct. However, if they say, well, our culture is not like this and it's not proper, anything which relates to traditions of society, well, that can be something which is acceptable. But any argument on the basis of religion cannot be accepted.
so theoretically, they are supposed to lead the prayer if they're the leader.
When they are chosen as the ruler, they have to, because this is their responsibility. You see, what Islam or the Quran wants to do is it wants to bring the rulers in contact with the masses. And the best way to do that is to do that once a week, every single time of the year, in which you see on 5 days they come on in contact. It's not just the ruler. I mean, just the head of the state. They are in, because simply we just cannot have the head of the state leading the prayer for the whole country. It's not possible. So what practically would be done is that in the province, in the capital of the city, the main mosque, that would be the place where the president or the prime minister woman, or whoever she is, will be leading. And in other areas, in different, cities, provinces, she or he will have the elected representatives, the representatives of the state which have been elected, leading that prayer. The governors, for example, or similarly, the machinery which is administering, and the what a ruler is represented through in those areas are the people who are going to lead the 5-day prayer. In other words, the 5-day prayer cannot be led by common Muslim scholars, as is happening today. It is essential that the rulers have to say that. Anything that you would like to know further about vis-a-vis a Muslim system? Remember, this is something of a very important nature, because another important point of discussion is that I just actually referred in my introduction, and that is zakat is the only tax which a Muslim government can impose on its citizens, or a state can impose on its Muslim citizens. You just cannot impose any other tax. So today, for example, if you are giving taxes beyond the zakat that you are paying, you can subtract those taxes from your zakat money, and if they are more than the zakat that is liable to you, then virtually you have paid your share. But on the part of the government, it has to be told that basically it's like a divinely appointed ruling that they just cannot ask people for more and more, as is the case. You see, one of the weapons of demonizing citizens, one of the weapons of persecuting citizens or exploiting them, is that a state enacts more and more taxes. Thus, for example, in the US, we have tax rates as high as 33%, even it goes to 40%. And in some cases, it's like you give half your salary away to the government. So you see, what it happens is, of course, you get the benefits also, because the money that you give, it comes back to you. But again, it causes a lot of problems as well, because you see, you're earning something, and then it is on the whims of the rulers that they can enact any amount of taxes and take that money away. It is here that the Quran has limited this right of the rulers, and it tells us that beyond zakat, you just cannot collect any other money, which in other words means that the budget has to be made in the light of that collection. Whatever that collection, you must make your budget in the light of whatever you have collected through zakat. Of course, there are other areas of revenue as well, but a major chunk of that revenue is zakat. And that zakat can be given regardless of your faith. This is another important thing, that zakat can be given to Muslim citizens, that can be given to non-Muslim citizens, it can be given for the benefit of humanity at large. So, as is another erroneous concept that the zakat collected cannot be given to non-Muslims. I think you might have heard of this. This also does away with that, because you see, in the times of the Prophet, also in the times of the rightly guided caliphate, also there was this public treasury in which all the funds would come at one place, including zakat, including the spoils of war, and then without any discrimination, they would be dispersed to the citizens. So again, regardless of faith, the tax which has been collected, the zakat which has been collected, must be given to all people for their benefit. And schools, colleges, I mean, all works of public welfare, bridges, housing schemes, whatever is needed for the welfare of citizens, that can be actually constructed through that public money that has been collected. So you see, this is a whole new, it's like a new worldview that you might have come across, that this is how Islam gives this leverage. It imposes certain restrictions and it gives a lot of independence as well. And it gives you that free hand that, barring these 5 principles which you have just studied, all other principles can be enacted as long as they don't go against this principle. And this also gives us this fresh breath of air that as far as these directives are concerned, I mean, they are just these 5 issues that we need to understand. All other things that we need to do for an Islamic state or a Muslim state or a nation state, they are done through common sense, through experience, through practice. But as long as these 5 principles are adhered to, the Quran does not demand that the rest of the things that we do also should be something which have been ordained by religion. No, religion gives you freedom. It tells you that besides these 5 things, any other thing that you need to legislate, of course, or bring into legislation, of course, it has certain principles, but other than that, it gives that free hand to us to practice. And also, let me reiterate one thing, which I find to be very intriguing, and which, when I was growing up and I was studying Quran and Islam, it really inspired me, and that was how important the rule of law is. You see, it gives you that it's not just your civic duty, it's not just your duty as a citizen, it's your religious duty. So when you are following the law, when you are not over speeding, when you are driving and you are driving within your speed limits, it is not that you are just doing it as a result of that state law or a civic law. No, when you're obeying this, you are in fact obeying God, because God has given this sanction, this sanctity, that all laws of the land have to be obeyed. And this gives the laws of the land a whole new light. In fact, it tells us that violation of a law is not an option. Hoodwinking the law is not an option. Bypassing the law is not an option. And to give you an example of in today's times, you see the hijab ban in France that we hear of so often. It comes and goes, and there are so many currents which are flowing regarding this hijab ban. So if Muslims of France, for example, they are told, and there are women, of course, who would like to wear the hijab, and if they are told that for a law is made that they cannot wear the hijab, of course, this law would be a law. I mean, I would call it a black law. It would be a law which is based on persecution. But you see, you have no option to disobey that law. You have only 2 options. Either you talk to the government, you ask them that this is our religious duty, that we have to wear the hijab, and therefore we should be allowed. If there are negotiations and those negotiations fail, then you just cannot be, breaking the law. The only option for you would be either to migrate from that country, or maybe follow the law, and maybe God will forgive you, because that is again something on the principle of compelling circumstances, that if you're living there and you cannot migrate from there, and you have to pass and you have to do something which is the law of God, then the Almighty might even forgive you, because of the fact that there was no other option for you. But still wearing the hijab and violating the law is not an option. This is something of such a radical, I would say, impute. It's like a radical thing that you might have heard, that even in living in non-Muslim countries, if you find a law which is against your own beliefs, you either settle. You make negotiations. You try to make them understand. If that doesn't happen, then the only option for you is to migrate. In the US, this happens a lot. You see, in the US, for example, we have this law in which you cannot marry more than one. This polygamy is prohibited, and is prohibited in many other countries as well. And what Muslims do, They marry one woman on the basis of state law, and then if they have to marry again, they don't declare it. They go in a mosque and have a second marriage or even a third marriage without declaring that marriage. And when they are asked that, well, what you're doing something against the law, what they say is, well, this was a state law and this is an Islamic law. Now, this is an absolutely wrong practice. You see, Islam does not make you, marrying more than one wife is not an obligation. It's not something of a persecution at all. So if there is a law that you cannot marry beyond one wife in a country that you're living in, I think Canada has the same laws, the US has the same law, even Australia has the same law. You just cannot justify a second marriage by telling yourselves, well, I'm just doing something which is my own religion is not prohibited. No, if the law of the land has prohibited something, and at the same time, as is the case with the polygamy, it's not an obligation. For example, the prayer is an obligation or the zakat is an obligation, but marrying 4 wives is not an obligation at all. So you just cannot marry another woman on the pretext that, well, because our religion allows it and we shall do it. So you see, this is so very important, particularly for a lot of Muslim organizations which live in non-Muslim countries. For example, in Canada, in the US, in Australia, in the UK, we have Muslim organizations who are actually working to overthrow the government under which they have pledged an oath. And on the one hand, they pledged an oath to be loyal citizens of that state, of that country. And on the other hand, their agenda is that they are going to overthrow the administration of that country. So this cannot coexist. And you can clearly see that Islam teaches us, or the Qur'an teaches us, that supreme spirit of following the law, how important it is to follow the law, and how essential it is that you not only follow the law, you follow it in letter and in spirit. And this is something which always intrigued me, and it gave me this courage. I mean, also this feeling of jubilation that when I'm sticking to the laws of my country, even if they are harsh on me, I'm in fact doing what my Quran asked me, what my Almighty asked me, and therefore it gives me this pleasure, and it also gives me the strength to follow that law even more in the right sense, instead of just bypassing it. Okay, yes, Amira, you have a question? Go on.
Sir, I had a question as to, those, like, if you need to overthrow a government, and you're thinking that they're doing something bad, like if they're doing corruption or something like that, you need to overthrow them as an organization. So is that a bad thing? Like, you declare that you're going to, openly declare or something?
Well, you see, that would, if you're openly declaring that you're going to overthrow a government, that would be against the oath of loyalty that you took. You can only overthrow a government, so to speak, through democratic means. When you're living in a country, like, for example,
an election or something, right?
Yes, of course. Because you see, you have that process given to you. Through an election, you can change the government. But on the one hand, you are you have committed that you're going to follow the law and also be loyal citizens. And on the other hand, what you are doing is you are conspiring to overthrow that country. That's absolutely wrong. That cannot be done. If you have to overthrow people who are doing something wrong, it could be corruption, it could be other forms of evils. It has to be a change through democratic means. You have to convince people. And if people are more convinced to have corrupt governments ruling them, what else can be done except making them understand? So the change has to come from the bottom up, not the top down. What we often do is try to overthrow people from the top. No, because you see, rulers are the reflection of what we are. And if we are generally corrupt, we'll have corrupt rulers. And if we are generally non-corrupt, generally we'll have non-corrupt rulers. So you see, the Quran tells us to reform a society from the bottom up. If you have better people in the society, the chances that those better people will end up as being your rulers. And if you have those bad or corrupt people amongst you, then the chances that they'll become your rulers as well. So this is a very, very important point.
Also, sir, like when you have to give these taxes, and you know that they're not going to a good place, like they're being harmful or something like that. So do you still keep on giving the taxes or not?
Yes, you see, because it's our obligation to give taxes. If they are being wrongly used, then the people who are wrongly using them will be called to account by the Almighty. But as far as we are concerned, we have to do what is right, and that is we have to pay the taxes to the government. If they are misusing the funds that we are giving them, they'll be held answerable. So it should not be the case that when you think that the government is not doing the right thing, you don't give taxes to them, and then you start giving the charity money to on your own behalf. Well, this does happen because you see what happens today is that most Muslim rulers and most Muslim governments are not even aware of the fact that they have the right to collect taxes or collect zakat. Because you see, the erroneous concept of zakat which we have tells us, well, zakat is basically a personal responsibility. As a person, I should give the charity to the society. And because of the fact that it is considered to be a poor fund, charity is like something that you just need to give to the society. As I've just explained, in a Muslim government here, you have to understand that charity is not just, for the poor. It's like running the whole state through that charity. But because today's rulers don't even realize that this is an obligation, so when you give charity on your own, it doesn't bother them. But in a true Quranic society, it has to be that they realize that it is a responsibility that they collect it, and then they disperse it on a wider canvas to all the needy citizens of the country. Okay, so I think let's call it a day today. I hope it has tickled some of your imagination, today's discussion. We also have that WhatsApp group that you have any questions regarding today's discussion, you can always post them there. Thank you very much for being here today. Inshallah, we'll be back next week with a new topic. And until then, it is Khuda Hafiz and bye-bye from your teacher.